My name is Ella Harris, and I'm about to tell you how a single Christmas morning shattered everything I believed about family, fairness, and the price of being the responsible one. I'm 32 now, a senior auditor at a mid-sized firm just outside Portland, Oregon. I've spent my entire life being the daughter who never needed rescuing, never caused problems, never asked for too much. That morning, watching my younger sister Sophie unwrap a house key while I received a kitchen appliance set, I finally understood the true cost of being reliable. The snow had started falling around 4 that morning, dusting our parents' Victorian home in a pristine white that made everything look like a Christmas card. I'd arrived early, as always, to help Mom with breakfast preparations. Sophie would stumble in around 9. Fashionably late and slightly hungover from whatever art gallery opening she'd attended the night before. This was our pattern, established over 32 years of being sisters and refined to an art form neither of us questioned anymore. "Ella, honey, could you check the cinnamon rolls?" Mom called from the living room where she was arranging presents under the tree. The same artificial tree we'd had since I was 12. Its branches now slightly bent from years of storage, decorated with the same ornaments in the same places. Tradition, Mom called it. Predictability, I thought, but never said aloud. I pulled the rolls from the oven, their sweet scent filling the kitchen. Perfect, golden brown. Exactly 8 minutes as the recipe specified. I'd been making these since I was 15, the year Mom decided I was responsible enough to handle the Christmas morning breakfast. Sophie had been tasked with setting the table that year. She'd forgotten, lost in sketching something in her room, and I'd done that too without anyone noticing. "They smell amazing," Dad's voice boomed as he entered the kitchen, his coffee mug already in hand. He'd been up since 5, I knew, sitting in his study going over financial documents. Even on Christmas, Harold Harris worked. It's where I got it from, that inability to truly rest, that constant need to be productive, useful, valuable. "Thanks, Dad." I arranged the rolls on the serving platter, the one with the small chip on the edge that Mom refused to throw away. Everything in this house had a story, a reason for staying long past its prime. Including, I sometimes thought, the dynamics between us all. Sophie arrived at 9:17, 17 minutes late, even by her standards. She swept in wearing a vintage velvet dress she'd probably found at some thrift store. Her dark hair piled artlessly on top of her head in a way that looked effortless, but probably took an hour to achieve. Where I was all sharp angles and professional polish, Sophie was soft curves and bohemian charm. "Merry Christmas, family," she announced, immediately gravitating toward the coffee pot. "God, Ella, you're a saint for making breakfast. I'm absolutely dying." "Rough night?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The Pemberton Gallery opening ran late. You know how these things go." She waved a hand dismissively, though we both knew I didn't know how these things went. My evenings were spent reviewing spreadsheets and preparing audit reports, not sipping wine with Portland's creative elite. We gathered in the living room after breakfast, following the same ritual we'd performed for 3 decades. Dad distributed presents with mathematical precision, ensuring everyone had an equal pile. Mom perched on the edge of her chair, ready to collect discarded wrapping paper the moment it left our hands. Sophie sprawled on the floor like she was still 8 years old, not 29. I sat properly on the couch, legs crossed at the ankles, posture perfect. The responsible daughter in her natural habitat. The early presents were predictable. Sweaters from Mom, books from Dad, small tokens between sisters. Sophie gave me a handmade scarf in colors I'd never wear but would treasure anyway. I gave her a set of professional-grade watercolor brushes I'd researched for weeks to ensure they were the right ones. Then Dad stood, clearing his throat in that way that meant something significant was coming. "Before we continue," he said, "your mother and I want to say how proud we are of both our girls. You've both grown into remarkable women, each in your own way." Mom nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. She cried at everything these days, from grocery store commercials to Sophie's latest painting. "We've been blessed," she added, "to watch you both find your paths." I should have recognized the setup then. The formal pronouncement, the tears, the way they kept glancing at each other like actors hitting their marks. but I was distracted by the warmth of belonging, by the rare moment of explicit parental pride. Sophie, Dad continued, reaching behind the tree for a small wrapped box. This is for you. My sister's eyes widened as she took the gift, her hands actually trembling slightly. It was small, jewelry box-sized, and wrapped in gold paper that caught the tree lights. She opened it slowly, savoring the moment in that way she had of stretching out experiences, mining them for every drop of emotion. Inside was a single key on a silver keychain shaped like a paintbrush. I don't understand, Sophie said, though her voice suggested she was beginning to. The Craftsman bungalow on Elm Street, Mom said, now crying in earnest. The one you've loved since you were little. The one with the studio space in the back and the garden you always said would be perfect for an artist's retreat. Sophie's scream could probably be heard 3 blocks away. She launched herself at our parents, all 3 of them tumbling together in a tangle of limbs and tears and laughter. I sat frozen on the couch, my brain struggling to process what was happening. They'd bought her a house. A house. How? Sophie gasped between sobs. How did you? I can't. This is. We've been planning for years, Dad said, his own eyes suspiciously wet. Saving, investing. We wanted to give you the foundation to build your dreams on. A real studio space, a place where you can create without worrying about rent or roommates or… Ella. Mom's voice cut through my spiral of thoughts. We haven't forgotten about you, sweetheart. She handed me a large box, heavy and wrapped in the same gold paper. I opened it mechanically, my fingers working without conscious thought. Inside was a complete set of all-clad cookware, the professional-grade set I'd admired once, months ago, during a brief conversation about upgrading my kitchen. We know how much you love cooking, Mom said, beaming. And these will last forever. Quality, just like you appreciate. Thank you, I heard myself say. They're perfect. And they were perfect. In their way, expensive, practical. Exactly what someone would buy for the daughter who had her life together, who didn't need rescuing, who found joy in small, useful things. The daughter who would understand. You'll understand someday, Dad said, as if reading my thoughts. Different children need different things. You've always been our rock, Ella, self-sufficient, capable. Sophie needs a little more help finding her footing. I nodded, the good daughter to the end. Of course, I understand. But I didn't understand. Not then. Sitting in that living room with my professional-grade pots and pans while my sister clutched the key to her future. Not during the champagne toast that followed, or the endless discussion of paint colors and garden plans. Not during the tour of the house that afternoon. Sophie spinning in empty rooms while I calculated property values and mortgage rates in my head. I smiled through it all, the way I'd been trained to smile. I offered suggestions for the studio space, recommended contractors for the renovation work, even volunteered to help with the financial planning. Because that's what Ella did. Ella helped. Ella understood. Ella never needed saving. The celebration continued late into the evening. Sophie called everyone she knew, sharing her joy with the generosity of someone who'd never learned to hoard happiness. Mom and Dad basked in their role as dream makers, retelling the story of finding the perfect house, of knowing the moment they saw it that it belonged to their artist daughter. I excused myself around 8, citing an early morning and a long drive home. The truth was simpler. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Every wall seemed to press closer. Every family photo a reminder of dynamics I'd never questioned before. Drive safe, sweetie, Mom said, pressing leftover cinnamon rolls into my hands. And thank you for everything today. I don't know what we'd do without you. Sophie's lucky to have a sister like you, Dad added, helping me carry my gifts to the car. Someone stable she can always count on. The cookware set took up most of my trunk. Quality that would last forever, they'd said. Like my role in this family, I thought. Permanent, unchanging, as reliable as stainless steel. I drove home through empty streets, the snow turning to rain as I descended from the hills. My apartment waited, dark and quiet, everything in its place. I set the cookware on my kitchen counter and stood there, still in my coat, staring at the boxes. Somewhere across town, Sophie was probably still at the house, planning her future in rooms that would hold her art, her dreams, her fully funded attempt at a creative life. And I was here, with my pots and pans and the beginning of an understanding I didn't want to have. Different children need different things, Dad had said. But what happened when one child's needs were invisible, assumed to be already met? What happened when being capable became its own kind of curse? I opened one of the boxes, pulling out a gleaming saucepan. My reflection stared back, distorted in the stainless steel. The responsible daughter, the one who would understand someday. That night, I lay awake replaying every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering through a new lens. Sophie's art classes and summer camps and study abroad programs, all funded without question. My scholarships and part-time jobs and careful budgeting, praised as signs of maturity. Sophie's failures cushioned and reframed as learning experiences. My successes expected, acknowledged with a nod and a reminder not to work too hard. We'd both been shaped by these patterns, Sophie and I. She'd learned that the world would catch her when she fell. I'd learned that falling wasn't an option. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would understand, just as they'd promised. But understanding and accepting were two different things, and I was done being the daughter who never needed saving. The call came 3 days later, while I was reviewing quarter-end reports in my office. Mom's number flashed on my screen, and I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering on the third attempt. "Ella, honey, I'm so glad I caught you." Her voice had that forced brightness that meant something was wrong. "Are you busy?" "Just working. What's going on?" "Oh, nothing serious." "Well, actually." A pause, the sound of her gathering courage. "Your father and I were wondering if you could come by this weekend. There are some financial matters we need to discuss." "Financial matters?" "Just some paperwork. You know how your father is with these things. He trusts your judgment more than those advisors at the bank." I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, numbers blurring together. "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, it's probably nothing. Some confusion with the mortgage and equity lines. You know how these things can be. Your father's been so stressed about it, and with the holidays and Sophie's house." Sophie's house. The piece clicked into place with an almost audible snap. "I'll be there Saturday morning," I said. "You're an angel. I told your father you'd help. You always do." After she hung up, I sat in my office chair, spinning slowly. Outside, Portland's skyline was gray with winter rain. I'd built a life here, careful and controlled. Every decision measured against its practical value. Now, for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped being so damn practical. Saturday arrived cold and clear. I drove to my parents' house with a thermos of coffee and a growing knot in my stomach. The Victorian looked the same as always, though I noticed the gutters needed cleaning and the front steps showed signs of rot. Details I'd trained myself to see. Problems I'd trained myself to solve. Dad met me at the door, and I was struck by how old he looked. When had his hair gone completely gray? When had those lines around his eyes become permanent? "Ella, sweetheart, come in, come in. Your mother's making lunch." "I can't stay long," I lied. "What did you need to look at?" He led me to his study, the same dark paneled room where he'd taught me to balance a checkbook when I was 12. The desk was covered in papers, bills and statements spread out like evidence of a crime. "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Just some confusion with the refinancing. The bank seems to think we're behind on payments, but that can't be right." I sat down and began sorting through the papers. Credit card statements with balances that made my eyes water. A second mortgage I didn't know existed. Equity lines of credit maxed out. And there, buried in the pile, foreclosure notices dated 2 months ago. "Dad," my voice came out steadier than I felt. "How long has this been going on?" He sank into the chair across from me, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. It started small, some bad investments, the market downturn, credit cards to cover the gaps, then the equity line for Sophie's art school loans. We thought we could catch up, but you bought Sophie a house. That was different. We'd saved for that separately. A special fund just for her, because we knew she'd need, that she wouldn't be able to take care of herself. I finished for him. Not like me. He had the grace to look ashamed. You've always been so capable, Ella. Even as a child, self-sufficient. We never worried about you the way we worried about Sophie. I turned back to the papers, my auditor's brain already calculating. They were underwater by at least 200,000. The house would need to be sold, and even that might not cover everything, unless... Does Sophie know? God, no. We couldn't. It would destroy her. She's so sensitive. So fragile. Another word I'd heard my whole life, always applied to Sophie, never to me. As if strength was something you were born with rather than something circumstances forced you to develop. I spent the next 3 hours going through everything, creating spreadsheets on my laptop, making calls to banks and credit companies. The situation was worse than even the papers suggested. They'd been living on borrowed time for years, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Shuffling debt like a shell game they were destined to lose. There's one option, I said finally. Sell Sophie's house. We can't. Mom had appeared in the doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands. It would break her heart. She's already started moving her things in, setting up the studio. Then you'll lose this house. Your retirement accounts are already gone. Your Social Security won't cover a rental and living expenses. You'll have nothing. They exchanged the kind of look that comes from 40 years of marriage, entire conversations, in a glance. Then Mom said the words I'd been both expecting and dreading. What if there was another way? What if someone could help with the payments, just until we get back on our feet? Someone? As if there was any question who that someone would be. I need to think about it, I said, closing my laptop. I'll be in touch. I drove home on autopilot, my mind racing through possibilities. My savings account held 6 years of careful accumulation. My 401k was healthy for someone my age. I had excellent credit, room to take on debt. I could save them, maintain the illusion, keep Sophie in her artist's haven and my parents in their family home. All it would cost was everything I'd worked for. That night, I called Megan, my best friend since college and the only person who really understood my family dynamics. Let me get this straight, she said after I'd explained everything. They bought Sophie a house while secretly going bankrupt, and now they want you to bail them out. They haven't asked directly. They wouldn't. That's not how we operate. No, you just read minds and fix things before anyone has to actually ask. Much healthier. Meg, I'm sorry, but this is insane. You know that, right? They chose to buy Sophie that house knowing they were drowning. They chose to hide it from both of you. And now they're choosing to let you sacrifice your future to fix their mistakes. It's not that simple. They're my parents. And you're their daughter. Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't that mean they should protect you too? I couldn't answer that. Protection was something Sophie received. I received trust, responsibility, the honor of being the one who could handle things. What are you going to do? Megan asked. I don't know. But I did know. I'd known from the moment I saw those foreclosure notices. Because that's who I was, the fixer, the solver, the daughter who understood. I spent the next week liquidating assets, applying for personal loans, negotiating with banks. I told no one what I was doing. My parents didn't ask, though Mom called daily with updates on Sophie's house renovations. Each cheerful story another twist of the knife. The solution came together piece by piece. I could cover their immediate debts, negotiate a payment plan for the rest, and take over the mortgage payments going forward. It would drain my savings, max out my credit, and chain me to a financial obligation that would take years to resolve. But it would work. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the transfer authorization that would start the process, when Sophie called. Ella, you have to come see what I've done with the studio space. It's absolutely perfect. I've already started 3 new pieces. I feel so inspired here, so free. It's like this house has unlocked something in me. That's wonderful, Soph. You sound tired. Are you okay? For a moment, I considered telling her everything, laying out the numbers, the crisis, the price of her dream house. But what would that accomplish? She'd give up the house, insist on helping, probably make everything worse in that chaotic way she had of trying to fix things she didn't understand. Just work stuff. You know how it is. I don't. Actually. She laughed, that tinkling sound that had charmed everyone since she was 3. Thank God I have you to handle all that boring adult stuff. I'd be lost trying to understand taxes and mortgages and all that. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my parents. I've reviewed your financial situation thoroughly. I wrote, I can help, but there are conditions. I outlined my terms with the cold precision of a business contract. Full financial transparency going forward. Access to all accounts and statements, a legal agreement detailing the repayment terms, and most importantly, no more secrets. Furthermore, I continued, Sophie needs to know the truth. Not the details of your debt, that's your story to tell or not. But she needs to know that her house came at a cost, that someone else is paying for her dream. She's almost 30 years old. It's time she understood that money doesn't materialize from fairy godmothers. I sent the email at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, my phone was ringing. How dare you? Mom's voice was shrill with indignation. How dare you put conditions on helping your family? We raised you better than this. You raised me to be responsible. That's what I'm being. You're being cruel. Sophie doesn't need to know about our problems. It would only upset her. Then maybe it's time she was upset. Maybe it's time she learned that stability doesn't just happen, that someone has to create it, maintain it, pay for it. She's an artist, Ella. She sees the world differently. You've never understood that about her. No, Mom. I've understood it perfectly. I've understood it every time I got a savings bond for my birthday while she got art supplies. Every time I worked summers to pay for college while she went to art camp. Every time you told me I was strong enough to handle things myself while she needed support. I've understood my role in this family since I was old enough to realize I had one. Silence on the other end. Then Dad's voice, heavy with disappointment. We thought you were better than this, Ella. Less selfish. Selfish. I laughed, the sound bitter in my throat. Do you know what's in my savings account? Dad, nothing, because I just transferred it all to cover your debts. Do you know what my credit report will look like after I take on your mortgage? Do you know what I'm giving up? We didn't ask you to. No, you never ask. You just present the problem and wait for me to solve it. Well, I'm solving it. But this time there are strings attached. You can accept my terms or lose the house. Your choice. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in my life, I'd set boundaries with my family. It felt terrifying. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I found an email from Dad. 2 words. We accept. The intervention, as I'd come to think of it, was scheduled for the following Sunday. I arrived early, armed with financial documents and a determination to see this through. Sophie was already there, helping Mom in the kitchen, both of them blissfully unaware of what was coming. Ella. Sophie hugged me, flower in her hair. We're making your cinnamon rolls. Well, attempting to. Mom can't remember if it's 1 tablespoon or 2 of cinnamon. 2, I said automatically, always 2. We gathered in the living room after brunch, the scene eerily reminiscent of Christmas morning. This time, though, I was the one with something to distribute. Sophie, I began, there's something you need to know about your house. Her face went from confused to alarmed as I laid out the basics, not the full extent of our parents' debt, but enough to understand that the house hadn't been bought with carefully saved funds as she'd believed. I don't understand, she said, looking between our parents and me. If you couldn't afford it, why did you buy it? Because we wanted you to have your dreams, Mom said, already crying. Because you deserve. Stop. I held up a hand. Sophie deserves the truth. We both do. I explained my role, the financial arrangement, the fact that keeping her house meant I'd be paying our parents' mortgage for the foreseeable future. Sophie's face went from pale to flushed to pale again. No, she said finally. No, I won't let you do this. I'll sell the house. I'll get a real job. You'll do what you should have done years ago. I interrupted. You'll keep the house, but you'll also take responsibility for it. Get roommates. Teach art classes from the studio. Find a way to contribute to the costs, because that's what adults do. Sophie, they pay for their dreams. But I didn't ask for this. I didn't know. Neither did I, but here we are. The room exploded into arguments, tears, accusations. Mom accused me of ruining Christmas. Dad accused me of being vindictive. Sophie accused everyone of treating her like a child while simultaneously crying like one. But something important happened in that chaos. For the first time in our lives, we were all being honest. The family roles we'd played for so long, the responsible one, the fragile one, the providers, the protected, began to crack and shift. I'm tired, I said when the shouting died down. I'm tired of being the only adult in this family. So here's what's going to happen. Mom and Dad, you're going to work with a financial counselor. Sophie, you're going to contribute to your house expenses. And I'm going to stop enabling all of you. Enabling, Dad's voice was incredulous. You think helping your family is enabling? I think doing for others what they should do for themselves is enabling. I think protecting adults from the consequences of their choices is enabling. And I think raising one daughter to be independent while keeping the other dependent is a form of cruelty to both. Sophie was crying quietly now, but they weren't the dramatic tears I was used to. These seemed deeper, more real. I never knew, she said. I never knew any of this. The money, the problems, what it cost you. They never told me anything. Because you were the dreamer, I said, not unkindly. And I was the realist. But maybe it's time we both tried on different roles. The weeks that followed were difficult. Sophie moved into her house but also got a part-time job at a gallery. She rented out 2 rooms to other artists and started teaching watercolor classes on weekends. For the first time in her life, she was paying her own way. And the pride on her face was something I'd never seen before. My parents struggled more. The financial counselor revealed more debts, more bad decisions, more magical thinking about money. But slowly, painfully, they began to face reality. Mom took on freelance work. Dad sold his classic car collection. They downsized their lives in ways they'd never imagined necessary. And me, I rebuilt. The loans would take years to pay off, but I restructured them for better terms. I joined a support group for adult children of financially irresponsible parents. Yes, that's a thing. And learned I wasn't alone in my story. I even started dating again, allowing myself to be vulnerable in ways I'd never risked before. The real change came 6 months later. At Sophie's first art show in her home studio, she'd transformed the space into a gallery. Her work displayed professionally. Price tags attached. Real prices. Not the whatever feels right approach she'd taken before. I sold 3 pieces, she whispered to me, glowing with accomplishment. Actual money for my actual work. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it. I'm proud of me too. And Ella. She pulled me aside, away from the crowd. I'm sorry. For all of it. For not seeing what it cost you to be the responsible one. For letting them make you carry everything alone. I was a child for too long. We both were, in our own ways. You were the baby who never had to grow up. I was the parentified child who never got to be young. Maybe we can meet in the middle somewhere. I'd like that. Later that night, as I helped her clean up after the show, Sophie said something that stopped me cold. You know what's funny? They said you'd understand someday. But I think they were the ones who didn't understand. They didn't understand that love isn't about saving people from life. It's about equipping them to save themselves. I thought about that as I drove home, past the Victorian where my parents were learning to live within their means, past the craftsman bungalow where my sister was building a sustainable creative life, back to my apartment where I was slowly reclaiming my future. The cookware set sat in my kitchen, still pristine, still untouched. I'd been too exhausted, too overwhelmed to use it. But tonight, I decided I'd cook myself a real dinner, something elaborate and impractical, something just for me. As I unpacked the pots and pans, I noticed a card taped to the bottom of the largest box. Mom's handwriting. For our daughter who nourishes everyone around her. May these help you nourish yourself too. I stood there holding that card, understanding finally dawning. They had seen me, in their limited way. They'd recognized my tendency to feed others, to provide sustenance. They just hadn't understood that sometimes the hungry person was me. Different children need different things, Dad had said. But sometimes what children need most is to be seen as they really are, not as the roles they've been assigned. Sophie needed to be challenged. I needed to be cherished. We'd gotten it backwards for so long that untangling it felt like learning to breathe again. I made myself dinner that night, nothing fancy, just a simple pasta with fresh vegetables and good olive oil. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite, using my expensive new cookware for its intended purpose, nourishing the cook. My phone buzzed with texts. Sophie, sharing her excitement about the sales. Mom, asking if I'd like to come for Sunday dinner. Dad, forwarding a financial update from the counselor showing they'd made their first payment on time. Megan, checking in to see how I was doing. I responded to each one, then put my phone aside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new boundaries to set and maintain, new ways of being a family that honored all of us. But tonight, I had my perfect pots and my simple meal and the knowledge that understanding had finally come. Not in the way they'd promised, but in the way I'd earned it. One difficult choice at a time. The next morning brought an unexpected call, not from family this time, but from Thomas Chen, a senior partner at my firm. Ella, do you have a moment? I'd like to discuss something with you. I closed my office door, settled into my chair. Of course, Mr. Chen, what can I help you with? Actually, I'm hoping I can help you. I've been reviewing the year-end reports, and your work has been exceptional, particularly the Morrison account. The client specifically requested you for their next audit cycle. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'll be direct. We're expanding our Seattle office and need a senior manager to head the new financial consulting division. The position comes with a substantial salary increase and full relocation assistance. I'd like you to consider it. I stared at my desk, at the framed photo of my family from last Christmas. Before the house key, before the truth, before everything changed. When would you need an answer? Take your time, it's a big decision. But, Ella, this is the kind of opportunity that doesn't come around often. You've earned it. After he hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office, possibility spreading before me like a map. Seattle. A fresh start. Distance from the family dynamics that had shaped and constrained me for so long, but also distance from Sophie. Just as she was learning to stand on her own. Distance from my parents as they navigated their new reality. I called Megan first. Holy shit, Ella, that's amazing. You're going to take it, right? I don't know. Things are just starting to stabilize here. Sophie's doing well. My parents are making progress. And you're still putting everyone else first. When does Ella get to choose Ella? It was a fair question. When indeed? That weekend, I found myself at Sophie's house, helping her hang new pieces for her next show. She developed a series based on family dynamics, abstract pieces that somehow captured the weight of expectation, the burden of roles, the liberation of truth. These are powerful, I said, studying a canvas that seemed to show two figures, one lifting the other, though it was unclear who was saving whom. Therapy through art. She laughed, but it wasn't entirely a joke. Cheaper than actual therapy? Well, maybe not, considering the cost of canvas. Sophie, I need to tell you something. She must have heard something in my voice because she put down her hammer, gave me her full attention. I told her about the job offer, watching her face carefully. Seattle, she said slowly. That's not so far. A quick flight. It's far enough. Far enough for what to live your own life, to make decisions without factoring in everyone else's needs. Yeah, I'd say it's exactly far enough. You think I should take it? She grabbed my hands, paint-stained fingers gripping mine. I think you've spent 32 years being the family foundation. Maybe it's time to build something of your own. But what about me? I'll be fine. Better than fine. You showed me how to stand on my own feet. Ella, let me do it. Mom and Dad. They'll figure it out. They have to. You can't live your whole life as someone else's safety net. That night, we had dinner at our parents' house. The dining room felt smaller somehow. Or maybe we'd all just gotten better at filling the space between us with truth instead of pretense. I have some news, I announced over dessert. I've been offered a promotion. In Seattle. The silence stretched like taffy. Then Mom, surprising everyone, raised her water glass. To new beginnings, she said. Even when they're scary. You're okay with this? I asked. Okay is a strong word, Dad admitted. But we understand. You've given us more than we had any right to expect. It's time you invested in yourself. Who will help with Mom started, then caught herself. No, that's not fair. We'll manage. We should have been managing all along. Later, as I helped clear the table, Dad pulled me aside. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. We put you in an impossible position, made you responsible for things that weren't yours to carry. That wasn't love, Ella. It was fear. Fear that without you holding us together, we'd fall apart. And will you fall apart? He considered this. Maybe a little. But isn't that how people learn, by falling and getting back up? You learned it so young we forgot Sophie needed to learn it too. We forgot we needed to keep learning it ourselves. 3 months later, I stood in my new Seattle apartment, watching the sun set over Elliott Bay. The space was twice the size of my Portland place, with a kitchen designed for someone who actually cooked. My pots and pans had finally found a home worthy of them. Sophie visited the first weekend after I moved, bringing a housewarming gift, one of her paintings, the one with the 2 figures supporting each other. For your new place, she said. To remember that holding each other up doesn't mean one person does all the lifting. How are things at home? Different. Mom started selling things on Etsy. You know those quilts she's always making? Turns out people will pay good money for them. Dad's been teaching financial literacy at the community center. Ironic, right? But he says teaching it helps him understand it better. And you? 2 more gallery shows lined up. The house is paying for itself now with the rentals and classes. I even started a savings account. She grinned. It has $12 in it, but it's a start. We spent the weekend exploring Seattle. 2 sisters learning to know each other outside the roles we'd been assigned. Sophie was funnier than I'd realized, sharper, more observant, and I was more adventurous than either of us had expected, suggesting midnight walks by the water, impromptu visits to strange little shops. You're different here, she observed over coffee on Sunday morning. Lighter. I feel different, like I can breathe. I'm glad you left, she said, then quickly added, I miss you, but I'm glad you left. Does that make sense? It did. Perfect sense. As I drove her to the airport, Sophie said, You know what the real gift was? Not the house. The house was just a thing. The real gift was you showing me I could be more than the baby, more than the dreamer who needed saving. You gave me the chance to save myself. We saved each other, I corrected. Just took us a while to figure out how. Philosophical Ella, I like it. Standing at the departure gate, Sophie hugged me tight. They were wrong, you know. When they said you'd understand someday. You understood all along. You understood that love shouldn't cost someone everything. You understood that being the strong one shouldn't mean being the only one. You understood that families should lift each other up, not designate one person to do all the lifting. When did you get so wise? When my big sister stopped protecting me from wisdom, I watched her plane take off, then drove back to my apartment, to my new life. My phone buzzed with messages, updates from the family group chat I'd finally agreed to join, Mom's latest quilt creation, Dad's joke about compound interest, Sophie's boarding pass selfie. But I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood at my window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle as darkness fell. Somewhere out there was my future, colleagues who would know me as myself, not as someone's daughter or sister. Friends who would meet me as I was becoming, not as I'd always been. Perhaps even love, eventually, with someone who understood that strength and vulnerability could coexist. My reflection in the window showed a woman I was still learning to recognize. Not the responsible daughter, not the family fixer, just Ella, figuring it out as she went, one day at a time. The cookware set gleamed from my open kitchen, waiting. Tonight, I decided I'd make something elaborate, not for anyone else, not to prove my worth or earn my place, just because I could, just because I wanted to. As I cooked, I thought about that Christmas morning that had started everything, the key and the pots, the promise that I'd understand someday. They'd been right about one thing, understanding had come, but not in the way any of us had expected. Understanding meant recognizing that love shouldn't require sacrifice from only one person. That being capable didn't mean you should carry everything. That sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was let them struggle. That families could change, even after decades of established patterns. Most importantly, understanding meant knowing when to stay and when to go, when to help and when to step back, when to be the foundation and when to build your own house, on your own terms, with doors you could open or close as you chose. I plated my dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my table for one. Outside, Seattle hummed with life and possibility. Inside, I savored the meal I'd made with my own hands, in my own space, on my own time. No one would call tomorrow needing rescue. No one would expect me to fix what they'd broken. No one would assume I was fine simply because I'd always managed to be. For the first time in my life, I was just Ella. And that, I finally understood, was more than enough. The changes continued to ripple outward in ways none of us had anticipated. 6 months into my Seattle life, I got a call from Mom that didn't begin with a problem to solve. "I wanted your advice," she said, the words foreign in her mouth. "Not for you to fix anything, just what you think." She'd been offered a chance to sell her quilts at a local artisan market, but was nervous about the investment required for a booth and supplies. "What does your gut tell you?" I asked, resisting the urge to create a spreadsheet. "That I'll regret it if I don't try?" "Then there's your answer." That's simple. Most things are when we stop overcomplicating them. She was quiet for a moment. "You learned that in Seattle?" "I learned that from watching Sophie after you gave her the house. She didn't overthink it, she just started creating. Maybe it's time you did the same." The first video of Mom at the artisan market came through the family group chat 2 weeks later. She stood behind a table draped with her quilts, looking nervous but proud. By the third week, she was selling out of inventory. By the second month, she was taking custom orders. "Your mother's becoming quite the entrepreneur," Dad said during one of our weekly calls. "She's even got me helping with the books." "How's that going?" "Well, I haven't bankrupted her yet." The self-deprecation was new, the ability to joke about past failures, a sign of growth. "Actually, she's teaching me about intuition. Apparently, not everything needs a formula." "Who are you and what have you done with Harold Harris?" "I'm the man who nearly lost everything by trying to control everything. Turns out letting go is harder than holding on, but the view's better." Sophie's evolution was perhaps the most dramatic. The artist who'd once waited for inspiration to strike had become disciplined, professional, strategic. She called one evening, breathless with excitement. "I got the commission. The City Arts Council wants a series for the new municipal building. Actual professional artist money, Ella, with contracts and deadlines and everything." "That's incredible. Soph, you've worked so hard for this. I had a good teacher. Remember when you made me create that business plan for the house expenses? I hated you for it at the time. I remember. Well, I used the same format for my proposal to the Arts Council. Turns out artists need business skills. Who knew? You knew. You just needed someone to stop protecting you from that knowledge. Speaking of which, I have something to tell you. I've been seeing someone, another artist. But get this, he has a day job, in accounting. An artist who understands numbers sounds perfect for you. He is. And Ella, I didn't introduce him to mom and dad for 3 months. I wanted to be sure first, to make my own decision without their input. Is that growth or what? It was growth. We were all growing, stretching into shapes we'd never imagined possible when trapped in our assigned roles. My own growth came in unexpected ways. The Seattle job was challenging, forcing me to develop skills beyond my technical expertise. I was managing people now, building teams, creating vision instead of just implementing it. The girl who'd been raised to solve problems was learning to inspire others to solve their own. You're different, Thomas observed during my 6-month review. More confident, more creative, taking risks I wouldn't have expected from your Portland work. Good risks, I hope. The best kind, calculated but bold. You're not just meeting expectations, Ella, you're redefining them. I thought about that conversation as I walked home along the waterfront. Redefining expectations. Wasn't that what we'd all been doing? My parents, learning to live authentically within their means. Sophie, discovering strength in self-sufficiency. And me, finding out who I was when I wasn't defined by what I could do for others. A year after the Christmas revelation, we gathered again at the family home. The house looked different, smaller somehow, but warmer. Mom's quilts decorated the walls. Dad's financial books were shelved next to Sophie's art catalogs. My Seattle coffee mug sat in the cupboard next to their everyday dishes. Should we do presents? Mom asked, but there was a new hesitancy in her voice, an awareness of what gifts could represent. I have an idea, Sophie said. What if we each share something we've learned this year, something real? Dad went first. I learned that being the provider doesn't mean providing everything. Sometimes it means providing the space for people to provide for themselves. Mom followed. I learned that protection can be a prison, that keeping someone safe from failure means keeping them safe from growth. Sophie smiled. I learned that being capable isn't a burden, it's a gift, and that the people who love you should help you unwrap that gift, not hide it away. They turned to me, waiting. I thought about all the lessons of the past year, the pain and liberation of breaking free from patterns that had defined us all. I learned that understanding doesn't come from age or experience. It comes from being willing to see things as they are, not as we wish they were. And that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to give to themselves. We sat in comfortable silence. 4 people who'd spent a year unlearning a lifetime of habits. The Christmas tree lights twinkled, familiar yet different, like us. I have actual presents too, Sophie announced, breaking the contemplative mood. But they're practical ones. Ella taught me about budgets, so everyone gets something useful this year. The gifts were indeed practical. A financial planning book for Dad that he actually seemed excited about. A business card holder for Mom's quilting enterprise. A high-quality laptop bag for my Seattle commute. We laughed at the role reversal, the dreamer giving practical gifts, while the practical one had given the gift of dreams. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out an envelope. For the house. Mom's face fell. Ella, no. We agreed. You've done enough. It's not money. I handed her the envelope. It's a deed transfer. I've been making the payments, but the house should be in your names. All of it. Free and clear. Dad's hands shook as he read the documents. But the loan, your credit, has recovered nicely, thanks to my new salary. This ties up the last loose end. Your house is yours. What you do with it is your decision. Just make it consciously this time. They cried. All of them. even Sophie, who hadn't cried since that awful intervention day. But these were different tears, cleaner somehow, free of manipulation or guilt. Why, Mom asked. Because love shouldn't come with strings. Because help shouldn't create dependence. Because it's time we all stood on our own feet, free to choose when to lean on each other instead of being assigned permanent roles. Later, as we cleaned up together, I found myself in the kitchen with Sophie. She was washing dishes, another first, while I dried. The rhythm was comfortable, two sisters who'd learned to work together instead of around each other. Do you ever miss it? She asked. Being needed the way you were. I considered the question. Sometimes, there's something seductive about being indispensable, but I wasn't really needed, was I? I was just convenient. There's a difference between being needed and being used, even when the using isn't malicious. I need you, she said quietly. Not to save me or fix things, just to be my sister, the real one, not the parent substitute you had to be. That's the kind of need I can handle. As I prepared to fly back to Seattle the next morning, I stood in my childhood room one last time. The certificates of achievement still hung on the walls, academic honors, professional recognition, all the markers of a responsible life, but now I saw them differently. Not as proof of worth, but as evidence of a child trying to earn what should have been freely given. Ready? Dad asked from the doorway. He'd insisted on driving me to the airport. Ready? During the drive, he was unusually quiet. Finally, as we pulled up to departures, he spoke. I've been thinking about that Christmas, the key and the cookware. We thought we were giving you both what you needed. Sophie needed security. You needed what tools to take care of others. You gave me what you thought I was, the caretaker, the one who feeds everyone else. But that's not who you are. It's part of who I am, but not all. Maybe that's what growing up really means, learning to show all your parts, not just the ones that make others comfortable. He hugged me then, properly, the way he should have when I was young and scared and pretending to be strong. I'm proud of you, he said. Not for what you've done or what you've achieved, just for who you are, who you've always been, even when we couldn't see it. On the flight back to Seattle, I thought about families and the stories we tell ourselves, how we create roles to manage anxiety, distribute responsibility, avoid the messy work of seeing each other clearly, how those roles become prisons, comfortable and confining in equal measure. But I thought too about redemption, about the possibility of change even after decades of patterns, about parents who could learn to parent differently, siblings who could relate as equals, and children who could finally, truly grow up. My phone buzzed with a message from the family group chat, a photo of Mom and Dad at the kitchen table, papers spread between them, working on their finances together. Sophie had captioned it, "Look who's teaching who about spreadsheets now." I smiled, then put my phone away. They were figuring it out, all of them, without my intervention. And I was figuring out my own life 300 miles away, close enough to love them and far enough to love myself. The captain announced our descent into Seattle. Below, the city sparkled in the afternoon sun, mint, Rainier floating like a dream in the distance. Home. Not the home I'd been born into, but the one I'd chosen. The one where I could be all my parts, strong and vulnerable, practical and dreamy, helpful when appropriate and boundaried when necessary. As we touched down, I thought about that long-ago Christmas promise. You'll understand someday. They'd been right, but not in the way they'd meant. Understanding hadn't come from accepting inequality or internalizing unworthiness. It had come from rejecting those things, from insisting on better, from breaking patterns even when breaking them broke our hearts. Now, finally, we all understood. Love wasn't about saving or being saved. It was about standing beside each other, whole and separate, choosing connection from a place of strength rather than need. It was about seeing clearly, speaking truthfully, and letting each other be human, flawed and growing and beautifully, impossibly free. The plane rolled to a stop. I gathered my things, ready to return to my life. Behind me, A family was traveling together, parents juggling children and carry-ons, the familiar chaos of shared responsibility. Once, I would have rushed to help, to make myself useful, to earn my place. Now, I simply smiled and moved past, trusting them to manage their own beautiful mess. I had my own life to live, my own dreams to chase, my own story to write. And for the first time, that felt like exactly where I needed to be. Understanding had come at last, not as a burden to bear, but as wings to fly. And fly I would, as far and as high as my newly lightened heart could carry me.